Beneath the waves that crash against every shoreline on Earth, there lies a secret, a hidden world that once belonged to our ancestors. Imagine standing on a beach, looking out at the endless ocean and realizing that 10,000 years ago, the coastline was 200 miles further out. That the land you're staring at beneath the water was once home to forests, rivers, valleys, and most importantly, human settlements. The ocean is hiding an entire chapter of human history. Ancient coastlines that were above water when humans were spreading across the world are now buried under hundreds of feet of seawater. And the civilizations that might have thrived there, their cities, their cultures, their innovations, are lost beneath the waves, waiting to be discovered. Today we're diving into one of archaeology's greatest mysteries, the drowned world of ancient coastlines that vanished when the Ice Age ended and sea levels rose catastrophically. We're going to explore the landscapes that disappeared, the evidence we found of human habitation beneath the ocean, and the shocking possibility that some of our most advanced ancient civilizations might be underwater, erased from history by rising seas. What you're about to discover will completely change how you think about ancient history and make you question everything you thought you knew about where civilization began. The Great Drowning. Let's start with the numbers because they're absolutely staggering. At the peak of the last ice age, around 20,000 years ago, sea levels were approximately 400 feet lower than they are today. 400 feet. That's the height of a 40-story building. Now imagine draining the ocean down by that amount and exposing all the land that would appear. The world would look completely different. The coastlines we know today would extend miles, sometimes hundreds of miles further out. Islands that are now separated by deep water were connected by land bridges. Entire continental shelves that are now underwater were dry land covered in vegetation, crossed by rivers, inhabited by animals and humans. The English Channel didn't exist. Britain was connected to mainland Europe. The Persian Gulf was mostly dry land with rivers running through it. Indonesia was part of a massive landmass called Sundaland. The east coast of North America extended far beyond its current position. Everywhere you look, the Ice Age world had dramatically more land surface than our modern world. Then the ice melted. As Earth's climate warmed starting around 15,000 years ago, the massive ice sheets covering North America, Europe, and parts of Asia began to melt. Billions of tons of ice transformed into water, flowing into the oceans, raising sea levels year by year, decade by decade, century by century. This wasn't a sudden flood, though there were periods of rapid rise. It was a gradual but relentless drowning that continued for thousands of years. By 6,000 years ago, sea levels had risen to approximately their current height, and all that land, millions of square miles of former coastline, was submerged beneath the waves. Now here's the critical question. Where do humans prefer to live? Coastlines, rivers, lakes, places with abundant water resources, access to both land and seafood sources, natural harbors for boats, and easy transportation routes. This pattern is as old as humanity itself and continues today. Most major cities are on coastlines or major rivers. Throughout history, coastal regions have been centers of population, trade, and cultural development. So when sea levels rose and drowned the ancient coastlines, they didn't just submerge empty wilderness. They submerged the places where humans were most likely to be living. The rising ocean swallowed human history. Doggerland, the Atlantis, that was real. Let me tell you about Doggerland because it's the most extensively studied example of a drowned ancient landscape, and it proves beyond doubt that humans were living on lands that are now underwater. Doggerland was a landmass that connected Britain to continental Europe. During the Ice Age, it wasn't just a narrow strip of land. It was enormous, roughly the size of modern England, stretching from what's now the British coast to the Netherlands, Denmark, and Germany. Picture this landscape. Rolling hills covered in birch and pine forests, wide river valleys where herds of deer, wild horses, and aurochs grazed, wetlands teeming with birds, coastal areas rich with shellfish. This wasn't marginal land. This was prime territory for Mesolithic hunter-gatherers, and archaeological evidence proves they were there in abundance. Fishing trawlers operating in the North Sea regularly pull up stone tools, worked bone, antlers carved into harpoons, and occasionally human remains from what was once Doggerland. One of the most significant finds came in 1931 when a fishing trawler hauled up a barbed bone point from the seafloor, clearly made by human hands, dated to around 11,500 years ago. Since then, hundreds of artifacts have been recovered. In recent years, advanced underwater surveys using sonar and seismic imaging have mapped the buried landscape beneath the North Sea. They've found the courses of ancient rivers, the locations of hills and valleys, and most intriguingly, areas that show signs of human settlement, concentrations of artifacts suggesting villages or long-term occupation sites. Doggerland didn't drown all at once. The process took thousands of years, from around 10,000 BCE until around 6,500 BCE, when the last high points finally disappeared beneath the waves. Early on, it would have been a paradise. Abundant resources, mild climate as the Ice Age ended, connected to both Britain and Europe, allowing easy migration. But as sea levels rose, it shrank. The river valleys flooded. The coastline crept inland year by year. Eventually, Doggerland became an island, then a series of islands, then isolated high points barely above water, and finally vanished completely. Imagine being a person living through this slow-motion catastrophe. Your grandparents told stories of when the hunting grounds stretched as far as you could walk. Your parents remember when the sacred gathering place by the coast was still far inland. Now in your lifetime, that place is underwater. You watch the sea claim more land with each passing year. Where do you go? How do you adapt? This wasn't myth or legend. This was reality for the people of Doggerland, and we've lost most of their story beneath the waves. Sundaland, the lost civilization of Southeast Asia. Now let's travel to Southeast Asia and talk about something even more dramatic than Doggerland. Today, Indonesia is an archipelago of thousands of islands separated by seas and straits. But during the Ice Age, it was part of a massive landmass called Sundaland that connected Sumatra, Java, Borneo, and mainland Southeast Asia. This wasn't just a land bridge. This was a subcontinent roughly the size of India, with its own mountain ranges, river systems, and diverse environments. Sundaland existed for tens of thousands of years, long enough for distinct flora and fauna to evolve there, and certainly long enough for human populations to establish themselves. Modern humans reached Sundaland at least 50,000 years ago, possibly much earlier. For the entire duration of human presence in the region, until around 10,000 years ago, people were living on a landscape that's now underwater. Archaeological sites from Ice Age Southeast Asia are primarily found on the islands and coastal areas that remained above water. But those were the highlands, the mountaintops of Ice Age Sundaland, the lowlands, river valleys, and coasts, the places humans prefer, are now hundreds of feet beneath the Java Sea, the South China Sea, and the Gulf of Thailand. What was lost when Sundaland drowned? We can only speculate, but the implications are staggering. This region is tropical, with year-round growing seasons and incredible biodiversity. If humans in the Middle East were developing early agriculture around 10,000 years ago, isn't it possible that humans in Sundaland were doing something similar? Perhaps cultivating sago palms, bamboo, tropical fruits? Perhaps developing water management systems for tidal areas? Perhaps building significant settlements along rivers and coasts that are now completely inaccessible? Some researchers have proposed controversial theories that Sundaland was a major center of human innovation and cultural development, and that when it flooded, refugees fleeing the rising waters carried their knowledge and technologies to surrounding regions, influencing the development of civilizations in mainland Southeast Asia, India, and even farther afield. While these theories remain speculative, they're based on a sobering fact. We've barely scratched the surface of understanding Ice Age Sundaland because most of it is underwater. The Persian Gulf's hidden secrets. The Persian Gulf is one of the most historically significant bodies of water on Earth, bordered by the lands where Mesopotamian civilization arose. But here's something most people don't know. During the Ice Age and for several thousand years after, much of the Persian Gulf was dry land. Sea levels were so much lower that the Tigris and Euphrates rivers flowed across what's now the Gulf floor and met to form a single larger river that continued south before finally reaching the much smaller ocean. This creates a fascinating mystery. Some of the earliest agricultural societies emerged in the Fertile Crescent, the arc of land surrounding Mesopotamia. By 7,000 years ago, farming communities were well established throughout the region. But what if agriculture developed even earlier on the fertile floodplains of the Proto-Persian Gulf, in the river valleys that are now underwater? What if there were settlements, possibly quite advanced ones, in regions that are now inaccessible beneath the Gulf? Some archaeologists have suggested that this drowned landscape might explain certain persistent myths in the ancient Middle East. The Sumerian king list speaks of kingship descending from heaven and the first cities being built in the most ancient times. Some of these early cities are described as being in locations that don't match any known archaeological sites. Could these be references to real settlements that existed before the Persian Gulf flooded to its current extent? It's speculative, certainly, but not implausible. What makes the Persian Gulf particularly intriguing is that the flooding happened relatively recently in archaeological terms. The Gulf didn't reach its current configuration until around 6,000 years ago, right on the eve of the historical period when writing was being invented. It's entirely possible that early Sumerian civilization was influenced by refugees from the flooding Gulf region, people who brought with them knowledge, traditions, and memories of older settlements now lost beneath the waves. The American coasts, what lies beneath? Let's turn to the Americas, because the story of drowned coastlines here is particularly important for understanding how humans first arrived in the New World. The traditional theory held that humans crossed from Siberia to Alaska via the Bering Land Bridge during the Ice Age, then migrated south through an ice-free corridor. But this theory has always had problems, particularly with timing. Some archaeological sites in the Americas seem to date earlier than the ice-free corridor would have been passable. An alternative theory that's gained considerable support in recent years proposes that humans migrated down the Pacific coast, traveling by boat, following the shoreline, and settling in coastal areas. This makes a lot of sense. Coastal routes would have been ice-free when inland routes were still blocked. Coastal resources, fish, shellfish, seals, seabirds, would have provided abundant food. Communities could travel significant distances by water. It's a compelling model for how the Americas were peopled. But here's the problem. The Pacific coast, where these early migrants would have lived and traveled, is now underwater. Sea level rise since the Ice Age has submerged the entire ancient coastline. Any archaeological sites from the earliest period of American settlement, the camps, the villages, the evidence of how humans actually spread through the Americas, are now on the ocean floor, often buried under sediment, completely inaccessible to traditional archaeology. We've found some tantalizing hints. In a few locations where underwater terrain is suitable, such as the Channel Islands off California, submerged sites have been discovered and excavated using underwater archaeology techniques. These sites confirm humans were living on what's now submerged coastal land over 13,000 years ago. But these are exceptions. The vast majority of the ancient American coastline remains unexplored, and with it, potentially the most important evidence for understanding how and when humans colonized the Americas. The Mediterranean's drowned harbors. The Mediterranean Sea has a complex geological history, and while its level has generally risen with global sea levels since the Ice Age, there are also numerous local factors: tectonic activity, subsidence, sediment deposition, that have caused dramatic changes to coastlines. Ancient harbors that once bustled with trade are now submerged. Islands that existed in antiquity have sunk beneath the waves. Settlements that ancient texts describe are now underwater ruins. One of the most extensively studied examples is Pavlopetri off the coast of Greece, considered one of the oldest submerged cities in the world. Dating to around 5,000 years ago, it features streets, buildings, courtyards, and even tombs, all preserved beneath the water. But Pavlopetri is from the Bronze Age, relatively recent in terms of human history. What about earlier sites? What about coastal settlements from the Neolithic period or even the Mesolithic? Most of those would be even further from modern coastlines, in deeper water, harder to find and excavate. The Mediterranean is particularly frustrating because we know how important maritime trade and coastal settlements were in the ancient world. The Phoenicians, Greeks, and Romans built their civilizations on sea trade. But they weren't the first. Trade networks existed much earlier. Obsidian from the island of Melos was being traded around the Aegean 7,000 years ago or more. This implies boats, navigation skills, and coastal settlements that would have been on shorelines now submerged. We're missing huge chunks of Mediterranean prehistory because the evidence is underwater. The Black Sea flood theory. We need to talk about one of the most controversial ideas related to drowned coastlines, the Black Sea deluge hypothesis. This theory proposes that around 5,600 BCE, the Black Sea, which was previously a freshwater lake at a much lower level than the ocean, was catastrophically flooded when rising Mediterranean waters breached the Bosporus Strait, causing the sea to rise rapidly and dramatically. The geological evidence for some kind of significant flooding event is fairly solid. Core samples from the Black Sea show a distinct layer where freshwater organisms are suddenly replaced by saltwater organisms. The Bosporus shows erosion patterns consistent with massive water flow. The question is whether this was a catastrophic flood or a more gradual process, and whether humans witnessed it. If the catastrophic version is true, imagine what it would have been like. Communities living on the shores of what they knew as a lake wake to find water levels rising rapidly. Not over decades, but over weeks or months. Villages are flooded. Farmland disappears beneath expanding waters. People flee inland, becoming refugees, carrying with them stories of a great flood that destroyed the world they knew. Some researchers have speculated this event could be the basis for flood myths that appear in many cultures around the Black Sea region, possibly even influencing the biblical flood narrative. Whether or not the Black Sea flood was as dramatic as the hypothesis suggests, it's undeniable that ancient coastlines around the Black Sea are now submerged. Underwater surveys have found evidence of structures, including stone tools and possible building remains on what was once the ancient shoreline. Entire landscapes where Neolithic peoples farmed and fished are now beneath the sea. What underwater archaeology reveals: modern underwater archaeology has transformed our ability to explore these drowned coastlines. Using advanced sonar systems, remotely operated vehicles, submarines, and specialized diving techniques, archaeologists can now reach sites that were completely inaccessible just a few decades ago. And what they're finding is rewriting our understanding of ancient human history. Off the coast of Israel, the submerged Neolithic village of ATLANTIS has been extensively studied. Dating to around 9,000 years ago, it features stone-built houses, a well, and most remarkably, a stone circle with carved stones arranged in a pattern suggesting ritual use. The preservation is remarkable because the site was rapidly submerged and then buried in sand, protecting it from erosion and human disturbance. Finding structures like the stone circle challenges our assumptions about prehistoric coastal peoples. These weren't simple hunter-gatherers barely surviving. They were building permanent settlements with ceremonial structures. Off India's coast, underwater explorations have discovered structures in the Gulf of Kambat that some researchers argue could be remnants of settlements dating back 9,000 years or more. While these finds remain controversial and require further investigation, they illustrate the potential for major discoveries beneath the waves. The challenge with underwater archaeology is that it's expensive, technically difficult, and time-consuming. The vast majority of ancient coastlines remain unexplored. We've found scattered sites in relatively shallow, accessible waters, but deeper sites further from modern land, and sites in regions without the resources for underwater exploration remain untouched. We're seeing glimpses of a drowned world, but most of it remains hidden. The implications for civilization's origins. Here's where all of this becomes truly significant. Our entire understanding of where and when civilization began is based on terrestrial archaeology, sites on land that happen to remain above water. We trace the development of agriculture to the Fertile Crescent around 10,000 years ago. We see the first cities emerging in Mesopotamia around 5,000 years ago. We watch civilization spread from these centers to surrounding regions. But what if we're missing earlier developments because they happen in regions that are now underwater? What if some of the most favorable locations for early agricultural experimentation were coastal areas with mild climates, abundant resources, and access to both terrestrial and marine food sources? And those areas are now submerged? What if there were significant settlements, possibly even urban centers, on the drowned coastlines that predate anything we found on land? This isn't wild speculation. It's a logical conclusion from what we know about human settlement patterns and sea level rise. Humans cluster at coastlines. The ancient coastlines are underwater. Therefore, important ancient human sites are underwater. The question isn't whether there are significant archaeological sites beneath the ocean. The question is how significant they are and whether we'll ever be able to access them properly. Some researchers have proposed that civilization's origins might need to be reconsidered entirely. Perhaps agricultural societies and complex settlements emerged earlier than we think, in coastal areas that were then drowned, causing populations to migrate inland and restart development in the regions where we do find ancient civilizations. Perhaps the Sumerians, Egyptians, and others were building on knowledge brought by refugees from drowned lands. These ideas remain speculative, but they're worth considering given how much of the potential archaeological record is inaccessible. The future of drowned coast research technology is advancing rapidly, and with it, our ability to explore underwater sites. High-resolution sonar can now map the seafloor in extraordinary detail, revealing features that might be natural or might be human-made. Autonomous underwater vehicles can survey large areas without risking human divers. Remote sensing from satellites can sometimes detect underwater features through analysis of watercolor, temperature, and other indicators. But perhaps most exciting is the development of new techniques for underwater excavation. Traditional archaeology requires carefully removing layers of sediment, documenting the exact position of artifacts, and preserving context. This is challenging underwater, but specialized tools and methods are making it increasingly feasible. Some projects now use 3D photogrammetry to create detailed digital models of underwater sites, allowing researchers to study them in virtual reality. The next few decades will likely see numerous significant discoveries from drowned coastlines. As techniques improve and more resources are devoted to underwater archaeology, we'll start filling in the massive gaps in our knowledge of coastal prehistory. Each new site discovered adds another piece to the puzzle of human history. Conclusion: beneath the waves lies the past. As we come to the end of our journey through the drowned world, we're left with a profound realization. The ocean isn't just water, it's an archive. Beneath those waves lie landscapes where our ancestors lived, worked, loved, and built their communities. The forests they walked through, the rivers they fished in, the caves they painted in, all submerged, all hidden, all waiting to be found. The story of drowned coastlines is ultimately a story about loss and recovery. We've lost vast portions of the human story to rising seas. Entire chapters of our history are missing because the evidence is underwater. But we're slowly recovering that story, piece by piece, site by site. Each underwater discovery reminds us that history is far more complex than the simple narratives we've constructed from terrestrial sites alone. Think about what this means. The next time you look at the ocean, remember that beneath those waves there are forests and fields, rivers and valleys, and most poignantly, human settlements. People who were just as intelligent, creative, and curious as we are, lived their entire lives on land that's now underwater. They built homes, raised children, told stories around fires, looked up at the same stars we see. Their world was erased by rising seas, but they existed. They mattered. And slowly we're learning to hear their voices across the ages and across the water. The ancient coastlines beneath the ocean are calling to us, asking to be explored, demanding to be understood. Every year, technology advances a little further, allowing us to reach a little deeper, see a little clearer. We're at the beginning of an archaeological revolution that will rewrite human history. Beneath the waves lie answers to questions we're only starting to ask. Who lived on Doggerland? What was Sundaland? Did the Persian Gulf hide agricultural societies older than Sumer? How did humans really spread through the Americas? The drowned world is vast, mysterious, and mostly unexplored. But it won't remain hidden forever. We're learning to dive deeper, map more completely, excavate more carefully. We're learning to read the landscape beneath the sea the way we read landscapes on land. And with each discovery, with each artifact recovered from the seafloor, we add another line to the story of humanity. The story that was lost when the coastlines drowned. The story that's slowly, patiently, waiting beneath the waves to be told again.